I just feel like it's a little more clean and not as much of a like tar.
I don't see that it hurts anybody as long as, you know, it's not getting blown in anybody's face or something like that.
I don't personally do it, but I think that the students who do it in school after told not to shouldn't do it.
My opinion of vaping is that it is not good for people's health.
I think it's dangerous. It's a gateway situation again. You know, anything that causes you to become addicted, to become wanting to take more of it, it's like it's taking over your mind, and I don't want to consume anything that's going to take over my ability to think.
I think it's dumb and pointless, and I don't see anything good that can come out of it, so why would you do it?
I think it's bad for you, and honestly, it doesn't make you look cool, it just makes you look weird.
Right, so there are a lot of different effects that vaping can have. Some of those effects are the same as smoking regular cigarettes, or what we would call combustible cigarettes, because an electronic cigarette is still a cigarette. It still has some of the same chemicals in it. The most notable, of course, is nicotine. It can make your blood pressure go up. It can, over the long run, put you at risk for high blood pressure and strokes and heart attacks and some very bad problems. In terms of other health impacts, we actually don't know what a lot of the long-term consequences will be of vaping because electronic cigarettes haven't been around that long. We know that when people began to smoke regular cigarettes, when it became popular, it was back in the 1940s, and it wasn't until the 1960s that we began to see a great increase in the number of diagnoses of lung cancer. We do know that there are cancer-causing agents that are in the fumes or the vapors from the vape devices. There's a new sort of trend going around called dripping. I don't know if you've heard of that. It's you take a vape-based device and you take the safety cover off of it, and you drip the liquid straight onto the coil, and it makes a hotter, more accessible vapor. That increases the level of nicotine you get from each hit, and so there are people that are starting to do that. We know that's likely to lead to worsening health problems, though we can't prove that yet.
You said about, I think it was nicotine poisoning. What is that?
Nicotine poisoning it's where you consume too much nicotine, and nicotine is actually a stimulant. So what it does is it causes your heartbeat to start racing really fast. Your skin gets clammy, you start getting kind of the shakes, you start getting nauseous, the room starts spinning and things like that.
So which do you think is worse? Do you think like vaping is worse, or like an actual cigarette itself?
From a personal standpoint, I do think that cigarettes do have a lot more chemicals. They do actually have, and I've heard ranges anywhere between 500 to 700 different additives. I've heard more, I've heard less. To be honest with you, what brings it all back for me is the fact that you're using 4 different chemicals that you're consuming on a regular basis regardless, including nicotine, which nicotine isn't actually all that dangerous for you. It's actually very similar to caffeine because it is a stimulant. It does allow your heart rate to race. It does give you that boost of energy when you need it. And to be honest with you, you can find nicotine in tomatoes, potatoes, cauliflowers, and bell peppers. The way I see it, if you've never consumed nicotine in your life, don't do it.
The younger you start, the more likely it is you develop these complications as time goes by. Not to even touch on, the way that we quantify smoking is we use what's called a pack year. How many packs a day did you smoke for how many years? And that correlates very well with what your risk is of developing lung disease or cancer in the future. But it varies depending on a lot of different factors. For instance, somebody who smoked 1 pack a day for 40 years is not at as much risk as somebody who smoked 2 packs a day for 20 years.
So, the new FDA regulations, they want to ban certain flavors of vapes. Do you think that will help discourage vaping, or do you think it will just encourage people to just smoke cigarettes?
So I think that to say we're going to ban some flavors is going to decrease the incidence of use is probably a little naive. Unfortunately, because there's a belief that vaping may be safe, it's become more accepted, and so I think that it is a renormalization of behaviors. You see somebody with a white tube in their fingers and they're blowing vapor. It used to be considered abnormal or not desirable, and now it's not as there aren't as many negative connotations to that. Nicotine is actually a very potent poison. In high doses, nicotine can be lethal. In one of the little 5 cc bottles, there's about 100 milligrams of nicotine, and the lethal dose of nicotine for a child is about 10 milligrams. So there's enough nicotine in those little bottles to kill a young child.
You talked about how a lot of this is still new, and are you worried that by the time we learn just how dangerous some of this is, a lot of kids will have already been using it for years? It will become like ingrained, kind of like cigarettes did. It was years before we. So is there a correlation to like the early days of cigarettes?
No, I think that's already happening.
Okay.
I really do. I think that's already happening. As I said, about 10% of teenagers smoke cigarettes on a regular basis. Now it's almost 20% use a vapor device at least a couple times a week. So when they begin to use that device, it is socially reinforced by their peer groups, and it's addictive, and so they keep coming back to it, and it becomes a habit that then becomes very difficult to break. And so I think that there is very great concern that that's exactly what's going to happen, and that's going to lead to an increase in smoking regular cigarettes as well.
Do you think in the long run, if you like start vaping or smoking young, in the long run, do most people regret doing it?
99% of the people I meet who smoke always say, I wish I'd never picked that up. I've never met a smoker who wasn't trying to quit. People who have stopped smoking, they'll tell you that I still want to smoke years down the line. It's a very life-deranging process, and so if you can avoid it or get off of it as quickly as possible, those habits don't get as ingrained.
What's some advice you'd give kids that vape now?
And it is not safe. It is not a safe alternative to cigarettes. And so you should try to stop. And if you're trying to stop, then the more often that you stop, the more likely it is that you remain abstinent or that you're successful in that. You are fighting for your life, and if you are still using the vapor device, you are losing that fight.